Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. He was the only one asking any interesting questions on TV1's Leaders Debate, host of Backbenchers and TVNZ's answer to John Campbell, the effervescent Wallace Chapman, and he is the MP for New Lynn, currently ranked at number 5 in the shadow cabinet, proof that meritocracy has taken a vacation in the Labour Party. The ever-brilliant David Cunliffe, welcome to you both tonight. We make predictions for the 2012 year in politics, and let's start by hoping the brain-dead pap that has passed as critical analysis this year in the mainstream media won't be repeated with the same fawning over John Key in 2012. Wallace, the media honeymoon with John Key was only broken in the final week of the election when Key heavied our 4 largest broadcasters with the police over the Epsom Tea Party tapes. Will we see more critical media in 2012?
Well, first I've got to say a disclaimer. I'm not the person who asks the best questions in the political. I'm not. It's too kind of you. But I've got to say I was actually very, very proud because I sat in the bath all the day before asking about that one. I had one question to ask. Right. And it was, what is that one issue that would get you on the streets protesting? Yes. What is the one issue? I wanted to get a solid answer. Interesting that John Key said world-class education. So we can talk a bit about that later on in the show. But the teapot tapes, critical media analysis. I actually think I was talking to a very senior journalist just last week. He's in his 60s, 70s. He's done a lot of hard yard journalism. And he said he was actually shocked that no young journalists came out and actually got those tapes and published it and actually wore the fine. They should have been made available. And I thought it was a bit gutless for them not to be made available. Actually, I think that it was really a farce. It took away from some big issues, and Phil Goff mentioned it took away from some serious issues. We should have been talking about other things. That's my personal opinion. But no, I just think that it was a media game. That's what it was. You know, going in the whole symbolism of going in behind the glass screen and pretending to sort of have a cup of tea.
It was interesting that the honeymoon only ended when John Key ended it. See, the media were more than happy to continue the love fest going, and it was only when he brought in the police that they suddenly went, "Oh, you think that we're going to actually get a media that will actually hold the government to account in 2012?"
Well, I mean, let's hope it, and that's one of the things that we were talking about off air, is that what is the role of the fourth estate, and part of the role of the fourth estate is to have types of shows like this, which you can actually have a wider forum to ask some questions and debate. But no, that the John Key, I just think personally, I think it should have been made public, and I was astonished actually that it didn't dampen his ratings.
David, one of the victories of brand John Key over his first term has been to smile and wave everything as moderate. But the privatisation agenda promised to national stakeholders means adopting deeply unpopular policy, maybe for his first time. How does the government spin this in the media in 2012?
Well, they use language very cleverly, and it's really important for the public to cotton on how it's being used against them. So they will use words like moderate, balanced, sensible.
Mum and dad investors.
Mum and dad investors to self-describe what they're doing, something which is frankly financial lunacy. You know, world equity markets are about as stable as a yo-yo, and so they don't know whether they're going to get 4 billion, 5 billion, 7 billion. What they do know is they're going to spend 100 million on fees to offshore bankers and lawyers. $100 million is a fair chunk of change. And where are they going to be at the end of it? Well, you know, 85% of our commercial asset portfolio will be sold down to half. We'll be worse off in cash within 9 years because of the loss of half of the dividend stream from those assets. And, you know, the balance sheet will be that much thinner, the Crown's balance sheet, because they won't have the assets to sell next time we're in trouble. So what we've been saying is, hey, look, election result or not, we know from the polling that roughly 70%, 3/4 of New Zealanders don't want those assets sold. So it's a big question whether there's a mandate. We will be taking to the streets to protest that. And we want people not to forget what's being done to them and to being done to assets that everybody owns, but only some will be able to afford to buy.
And it's interesting, isn't it, Wallace, that the only people who are going to be able to afford to buy those shares are the same top 10% who have received $2 billion in tax cuts from this government over the last 3 years. It's kind of locking a lot of poorer New Zealanders out, isn't it?
I'm just interested that what David Cunliffe says about the loss of dividends. That is quite an interesting issue that hasn't been covered so much. About there is a what you're going to see is you're going to see a sugar spike of about $7 billion, but really that loss of dividends over time is quite serious. That's a big thing,
serious.
And that hasn't been drilled down into enough. I think. What is the long-term ramifications?
Partly because the government hid that dividend loss with some funny accounting in both the budget and the pre-election update.
Well, I'd like to see more coverage of that. Speaking of what I'd like to see questions asked, but in terms of being fair, just in terms of some people, young professionals who've got an extra 5 or 10 grand to actually say, hey, I wouldn't mind actually investing in a local company. What can I do? The property market is up and down. The financial market is up and down. What about, okay, Mighty River Power is coming on stream in the second half of this year. Hey, darling, what do you think about putting 10 grand into those shares? I think you'll see a bit of a surge, actually.
And then, of course, when they're quite valuable, and then maybe a month after that, oh, look, people from overseas are offering me much more money than I bought. I may as well sell to them. I mean, if it's just about making money, it'll just go off.
Well, that is the question. I mean, I have no, I have no compunction that National will be successful in actually getting young professionals and actually buying some of these, and not just mum and dad investors. But the question is,
that's true, and the risk for the opposition is that if we make this the only theme of our opposition in the rear-view mirror by 2014, it'll look a pretty stale story. Because the government, at the end of the day, does have the numbers to force this through.
That's right.
The Maori Party has succumbed to the temptation to go along with something they apparently don't like as long as they get a slice of it. You know, so there goes principle there.
Oh, just briefly, just on that, Bob, I know I'm jumping in and doing a backbenchers. Sorry.
Yeah. First mention of his show. I said it within 5 minutes.
That's right, that is a backbencher, isn't it?
Well, it's my first and only time. I'm just saying about the Māori Party, David and Bomber. That whole idea, it was no surprise to me actually about that jumping on board. No, I can't recall, but the Māori Council, the people who really run the issues, you've got sort of the high-end tier, people like Tainui wanting to come in, for example, Mighty River Power and say, hey, we'll have a stake of that. That's going to be a big issue.
But it's a mark of the integrity of Nanaia Mahuta, though, the Tainui MP, that she has, despite those pressures, absolutely held the line against the asset sales program.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's a mark of her integrity.
Quick question to both of you. In 2012, will the New Zealand Herald still read like it's being edited by Stephen Joyce, yes or no?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, it's a very tabloid publication now, and the Sunday Herald, don't get me started.
Certainly is. New Zealand Herald, will it still sound like it's being edited by Stephen Joyce?
Look, I don't know. I think the big thing for me about media in general, and that includes the New Zealand Herald, is that reversing some of the issues that are really important. For example, climate change is going to be another massive issue. Let's take it out of the world section of the New Zealand Herald and put it on page 1 or page 3.
So maybe a columnist, unlike Jim Hopkins, who actually thinks it's happening.
Well, he's got red glasses. You haven't.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, panel. Moving on. Winning this year's award for injecting the most amount of Prozac in a 12-month calendar year would have to go to Treasury. Their bewildering optimism for growth in New Zealand, as the entire neoliberal Washington consensus teeters on the edge of oblivion, suggests a department so welded to free market dynamics that they can't see that this is a unique crisis of capitalism that demands solutions well outside of Treasury's ideological paradigm. Wallace, Treasury warned in the budget of black swans, events that are so calamitous to the economy, and they've priced these swans at about twice the cost of the Christchurch earthquake. What policy directives taken by the government get even close to facing those black swans in 2012?
Well, I mean, David Cunliffe's the man really to ask about that. He's the economic guru. I'm just an
humble broadcaster.
That's true. But what I see, what's fascinated me in terms of the black swans is how Treasury sort of, or for example, predicts in the just reading the Governor General's speech. You know, if you're reading the speech, it looks. We're living in Baggy in the Hobbit world, you know. It's just it's a beautiful world.
Yeah. We're living in Baggy. Yeah.
I read it at a bus stop, waiting for the 154, and tears in my eyes. You know, and one of those things was that Treasury, there's going to be an operating surplus again, 2014-15. Yet again, the predictions and some people like Gordon Campbell, I think it is. He said, look, these predictions of operating surpluses never come quite true as to. So that's my issue.
I really like the Lord of the Rings analogy. New Zealand, like the Shire, and New Zealand is a bit like hobbits. And there's this guy a bit like Saruman who has a way with words, who's telling them that it's all going to be well. Meanwhile, he's working with some fairly dark forces underground to change the nature of the Shire.
David, the best case scenario is that the Eurozone stabilises and slumps into a decade-long recession. America crawls along at the same rate, politically paralysed because Republicans refuse to raise tax on the wealthiest 1%, and Chinese growth slows, impacting Australia's two-gear economy into a one-gear economy. That's the best case scenario. What are the economic solutions in 2012?
Let me just start off by looping back, if you like, to the previous question. The government forecast 3.5% GDP growth for 2012, which was always ultra optimistic, and you know they even ran their own counter case in the pre-election update, which was much grimmer, and said, "Hey, this could happen." They've already revised it down to 3%, but the one to watch is New Zealand Institute of Institute of Economic Research, which is down to 1.5%.
Yeah,
if that happens, which I think is immensely likely, highly probable, the government will be over $1 billion short in tax revenue. Now, you know how Bill English will react to that, which is the, quote, sensible and balanced thing to do is to cut spending so we balance the books, because he takes an accounting approach to this. The problem with that is the whole economy will wind down further, unemployment will rise, confidence will sink, and it will resemble the early 1930s gradually. And remember that the 30s depression wasn't a one-shot deal in 1929. It was a succession of downers, which led to a very flat, long rut. And I think what we haven't yet seen is the end of the cascade. Ask about the Eurozone. I am bearish on the Eurozone. I think we're going to see, by mid-year, significant disruption. Now, I don't know whether it will completely fall apart or whether just some countries will leave, how they will handle the fact that the Brits don't want to be part of a fiscal union, because there's only two ways out of this mess. It is not sustainable at the moment, and for viewers what's happening is the bankers are so nervous about it, they're demanding higher and higher interest rates to leave their money in Europe. Well, the trouble for European governments is the cost of their borrowing is going through the roof, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it will bankrupt governments like Italy. Too big to bail, too big to fail, oh my God, it's the whole world's problem. What do? Two ways out. One, forget about the Eurozone so the countries in trouble can devalue their way out. That's what Greece ought to have done. Or you go the other way and you have a fiscal union where they pool their tax money to get out of it together. But it is a bit like the fullback taking the high ball in a rugby match. You can pass it, you can kick it, you can run with it. Don't stand still holding the ball, or that forward pack is going to nail you. So they have to make a decision. In the meantime, markets are going to vote with their feet. Prediction number one, 2012 is going to be the worst year for the international economy for about 30 years. And the New Zealand government is going to respond by screwing the lid down tighter. They have no alternative ideas. They have no plan B. That was the lightest, shortest, most vacuous excuse for a speech from the throne that I've heard in 12 years of Parliament. Helen Clark would never have given a speech like that to a Governor General.
Do you think so?
That is the lightest piece of wallpaper I've ever seen. You
weak,
would never have known that the world was teetering on the brink of economic disaster. It was all sunlit uplands. Give the kids a bit of candy floss, you know, and shut them up. Well, hang on. How long is this false upland going to last? Well, I bet you it won't last by next Christmas.
What global economic predictions do you have for 2012?
I want to continue the doom, but really, excuse me, David Cunliffe has hit on a salient point. That back to the operating surplus is not going to be anywhere near that. The NZIER is more, who are a bunch of really sharp folks actually.
It's half what the government's predicting, and that's their revised.
Yes, it is. That's right. Yes, it is. Now, look, I can say this on the show now that the NZIER prediction, or what that is what it'll be. 2012 is going to be quite serious actually. What we're seeing is seeing this type of recession which is sustained, it's lingering.
That's right.
And it's very, across the world, including New Zealand, it's very flat growth. It's actually quite a worry It's a big worry.
Yeah, it is. But then will the government respond as they have been? Will the public, will the media give them the get out of jail free card, which is, oh, it's not our fault.
That's right.
It's all these dark external forces.
Yeah,
well, we've just got to be sensible and balanced and stay on the middle of the road. Or will people actually come to the point of saying, guys, the rest of the world is melting down. We want to know what your plan is.
That's right.
Because, you know, fullback analogy, just holding the ball and waiting for the forward pack,
not good
not
enough.
smart.
Yeah.
It's a big concern.
Not smart. Smile and wave doesn't get you there.
That's
And when
right.
you're a small, one would say, perhaps subscale economy, you have to have a strategy, by which we mean a clear vision for where you're going to get to, and a measurable plan for how you're going to get there, working back from the objective. And there was none of that.
Yeah, but having said that, they've come back, and that was part of the Governor General's speech as well, saying we're investing many millions into innovative technologies, into, I think it's land tech. They're doing all that. That's one of the ways.
We're going to restructure IRL.
They're bringing youth back into the workforce by introducing an 80% proper wage, that type of thing. That's what they say they'll do.
If slashing wages for young workers
so that
they take jobs off more mature workers is the answer. What the hell was the question? I mean, that is not an industry strategy. That is not an employment strategy. That is a temporary movement of the deck chairs on the Titanic at best. And, you know, that's a recipe for an economy built on Mick jobs, not Irish jobs, but McDonald's jobs.
Exactly.
You know, that doesn't solve the problem.
Thank you, panel. Moving on. We've got to move on. This is only 30 minutes. Moving on to the Arab awakening and the occupation movement. Both of these were one of the most important social media-inspired events of 2011. What will occur in 2012? Wallace, the Hawks will hold Libya up as an example of a successful invasion. Your predictions on Syria and what now for the occupation movement?
Syria is actually very interesting. Syria is very serious. Those who've sort of read a little bit about it, I've read a little bit about it, but the crackdown is vicious and it's at once brutal. In Bahrain as well, it is very brutal. There's a couple of, I guess, political issues. Let's not forget that the biggest force of US military hardware is just off the coast of Bahrain.
That's right,
the US Fifth Fleet, which is right next to the eastern side of Saudi Arabia.
Most of Bahrain is a US military airport.
Yeah, no, so you've got a little bit of that. That's just a bit of the background. And so what's happening is that there's not a lot of, I guess, what you could call international pressure to crack down on Syria and Bahrain. It may happen. It's very different from what's happened in Tunisia and Libya, but it's very serious, and I think that's we should do all we can to help support the citizens in there. I guess their move to democracy, to call it. Yeah.
And our own movement within the West, the occupation movement. You think it's going to be as strong next year or weak?
Let me just tell you. Let me just, from a personal perspective, that the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Occupy is something quite unique in citizens' affairs and public affairs. It's what it is, it's an example of the fissures and stretches that's happened. You know, when my brother lives in Michigan and he says, "Come to Michigan," you wouldn't believe the line between having a good job and having a mortgage and the line between poverty and being on the streets is wafer thin.
Oh yeah.
And he goes, living in the States at the moment is scary stuff. And he goes, come here and find out. And that was a response of what's happening. It's not pretty, and that fed over into some of the I guess some of the fissures and some of the just the insecurities that's happening, and it's going to continue
because the economy is going to get worse.
It's just,
David, tensions between America and Iran have ratcheted up, with Iran on the brink of nuclear power and the recent taking of a US drone. Do the Middle East view the awakening as a genuine movement for autonomy or as a Western-inspired plot to destabilise the region?
I think that the fact that it's been empowered by social media and that it's a movement of the young makes it pretty difficult to characterize it as a CIA plot.
Right.
And in fact, I wonder whether if American foreign policy had its preference, they would want quite so much instability all at once.
Sure.
The far bigger game here is about, as you referred to earlier, the movement of economic and ultimately political and military power from the Western Hemisphere to the East. America doesn't need to be bleeding in the desert while China is building its capability and growing in stature in East Asia. That's the far bigger geostrategic game. The Arab Spring, I believe, is a genuine upswelling of public indignation against often 30-year-old dictatorships.
That's true. That is true.
We should be doing what we can to encourage the progress towards democracy. I don't believe the situation of President Assad in Syria is sustainable.
I
Might
agree
be
with that.
out on his Assad before too long.
But he will be.
But you know, the counterfactual is not clear either. And if we look at what's happened in Egypt, where power has passed, and it is, you know, it's pretty brutal power, has passed from Mubarak to the military. The military are now enforcing their hold on power and being, one would argue, pretty clever about splitting the uprising into the Islamist and non-Islamist segments, and then maintaining their grip on the balance. So there's a long way to go, and you know, the sad thing about it is that in many of those countries, the road to democracy is paved in blood. And here, at least in New Zealand, we should give thanks that, hey, we have peaceful transitions of power. We've just had a peaceful succession to power, and that's part of what enables us to be a really healthy country. But coming back to the fourth estate, that only works if we have critical media and good information reaching the public so that they can make good decisions.
Question of both of you: will the first promise John Key breaks of 2012 be pulling the SAS out of Afghanistan?
That's a big question. Of pulling the SAS out of Afghanistan.
It's apparently supposed to happen in March, but there's no way we're pulling out. We're not pulling out.
Look, I don't know enough about it, actually. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to put my hand up and say I don't know too much about it. I've been reading Other People's Wars by Nicky Hager, and I just know that the things are a lot more complex about what's going to happen there. I do know that there are questions about what they're doing there. That is what I'd like to know more about.
What are your thoughts? Is that going to be the first promise broken?
You think John Key can get to March without breaking a promise? Hello. How about the promise that he's going to independently investigate Anne Tolley's supposed lack of information about the Northland Principle?
Oh, that's a 2011 promise. That's a 2011 promise.
Yeah, well, that was so 2011,
That's right.
But I think that promise will be broken. Here's a prediction: you're going to have at least one ministerial resignation in the first 6 months of 2012.
Who will that be?
Might be Mrs. Tolley, you never know.
I love that. Okay, thank you, panel. Rapid fire prediction round now. Both of you, will there be any by-elections in 2012? Where?
Don't know.
By-elections? Any by-elections?
Yes, but I wouldn't want to say where.
Okay, next one.
I'll bet you that not all of the New Zealand First Caucus is sitting in the same seat.
I think we can all accept
next
that.
Christmas.
That's right. Okay. Next one. How many bullshit rumours spawned by David Farrar or Cameron Slater will make it as headline news in 2012? Just a rough number.
3 or 4, I don't know.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Oh, 300 or 400?
Okay, 300 or 400.
Doesn't David Farrar edit the Herald?
Exactly. Will child poverty be as politically ignored by the government in 2012 as it was in 2011?
Yes, it will be.
Not by the spin doctors.
Not by the spin doctors.
There'll be the veneer of progress, and underneath there'll be the same old cold hard agenda, which, as we said before, will become more apparent to people as the fiscal pressure goes on, as the international environment gets worse.
Will Len Brown realise the government have no interest in his train in 2012?
He'll realise they have no interest in his train in 2012.
They have no interest in anything.
Len Brown will
he does.
realise that there's no middle ground in politics, that it doesn't matter how much you kiss up, this government wants him out, they want him gone. He's a little island of red in a sea of blue, and they want him gone.
Their boy Cameron Brewer, they're lining him up, aren't they?
They are lining up Mr. Brewer.
Predictions for National in 2012?
Predictions for National in 2012, I think that the new Commission on Poverty, headed by Bill English, co-hosted by Tariana Turia, will be a bit of a farce, I think. I do believe that. I think that National, they want to keep their the unemployment under below 6%. I think it'll rise to about 6.1 to 6.2%. Those are my two big ones. And I think that national standards will continue to be a real issue in 2012. I think that's the other
Prediction
one.
for Labour?
Prediction for Labour. I think that good question. I think that David Shearer will have a short hunt. I mean, he's a good man. He's a clever guy. The polls will rise quite sharply and then flatten off.
Predictions for the Greens?
Predictions for the Greens is they will keep on being popular. They'll rise. I mean, they're solidifying their support. The economic policies are fairly good. ACT will continue to go the other way.
Māori Party?
Māori Party will continue to struggle on, trying to find relevance.
Mana?
Mana Party will slowly rise in support, and I think let's hope, because I think it's another strong force that someone like Annette Sykes or Sue Bradford gets in 20.
United Future?
United Future. Oh, I love Peter Dunn. I don't want to hear a bad word about Peter.
Sakes, unbelievable. Predictions for National in 2012?
The agenda will become clearer and clearer to the average Kiwi as the pressure goes on. And there'll be no plan B.
Predictions for Labour?
They'll see us come together as a fighting force in the House, and we're going to really go after the government.
2014's yours?
2014 is uncertain, could well be ours.
The Greens.
We've got to earn it.
Yeah. Greens for 2012?
Greens of 2012, I think what people will find is that the gloss comes off the Greens as Labor resumes its rightful place as the lead force in the opposition.
Well, with so many votes, what are they actually going to achieve? That's going to be the question,
They've got some good talent in their incoming caucus, and I think they're well led. But I think you'll see more cooperation between the Greens and Labor and New Zealand First, and we'll hunt more as a pack.
ACT? Predictions?
Well, you know, it's a bit like making love in the canoe, isn't it? It's very close to the waterline, and they don't need too many leaks before it sinks.
Haven't heard that one before.
I've never heard that before. Māori Party predictions.
Boy.
Well, I'm a little biased, but if we'd had a Māori deputy leader, that would have been the end of the Māori Party.
Right. Mana?
Mana, I think what will happen is that they will become, I kind of think as Wallace is hinting, they will become more of a far left alternative and not just a Māori-centred party, and I think there's room for that on the spectrum, and it's a gap that the Greens have created.
United Future.
United Future who?
Yeah, surely he's gone in 2014. Surely Charles will catch him.
I don't think he will stand in 2014.
Oh, okay. Finish the sentence.
There is no haircut that can get him back into vogue by 2014.
Wallace Chapman, finish the sentence. New Zealand stands on the brink of
an abyss. Back to what I was saying, 2012, not going to be pretty.
Yeah. New Zealand stands on the brink of?
The brink of having to decide for itself what its future is going to be. The default proposition will be a continued ratcheting down, an acceleration of young New Zealanders leaving, and ultimately us not being viable as a nation state. We'd end up as a state of Australia international.
Let's wrap the show with the last prediction. Wallace, your last prediction for 2012 is?
Excuse me, please. My last prediction for 2012, I've got it written down here actually, there's going to be more. My last prediction for 2012 is that alcohol will continue to be a big issue, and let's hope it rises to 20. I think, talking to Gordon McLaughlin, the senior journalist, he said that alcohol has been the defining issue of politics over the last 100 years.
Yes.
It'll never go away. It'll be a huge issue. The Law Commission report will still come back in 2012 as an issue. That's my prediction.
David Cunliffe, your final prediction for 2012?
I think the press gallery is going to take a more realistic view of John Key than they have done, and I think you're absolutely right that calling the cops on major broadcasters during an election campaign has done him permanent damage. He's not the smiley, friendly guy. He's the guy who reaches for the lawyer or the police when he's under pressure. John Key under pressure is a different beast from John Key on a good day. People will see that.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Wallace. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final prediction. The power to take DNA for merely being arrested, retrospectively spying powers for the police, and the end of jury trials for anything punishable with 3 months or more in prison showed that in 2011 we had the largest erosion of civil liberties ever undertaken since the waterfront lockout in the 1950s. Add private prisons influencing incarceration policy for their profit margins with unchecked police power, and I'm predicting a sharp jump in imprisonment rates for 2012. But it won't be until it's white middle-class kids getting thrown in there that this pendulum will have been declared to have gone too far. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thank you to all the crew at Stratos, Will, Tom, Debs and Jim for putting Citizen A together each week, to the vast array of panellists, and of course you the viewer for making Citizen A one of the most viewed shows on this network. Citizen A returns 19th of January 2012. Enjoy your summer. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.